Well, good morning. I'm Kaszniak, a neuropsychologist and professor at the University of Arizona, and I also serve as Chief Academic Officer of the Mind and Life Institute, the co-host of this meeting along with Rockefeller University. I want to offer a very warm welcome. It's so nice to see how many of you are here. We're very grateful for your attendance. And I want to begin by just telling you a few things about the nature of this meeting. But first of all, to note that this is the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Mind and Life Institute, 25 years ago. Mind and Life Institute seeks to understand the human mind and also the potential benefits of contemplative practice through an integrated way of investigation that combines the first-person knowledge from the world's contemplative traditions with the methods and findings from contemporary scientific inquiry. Ultimately, the goal of the Mind and Life Institute is the relief of human suffering and the promotion of human flourishing, goals that it shares in common with healthcare practice and with biomedical research. The speakers and discussants that you're going to hear from today care very deeply about human distress and suffering in illness as well as in the normative challenges that each of us face across the lifespan. And we're going to hear a good bit about that today. As you know, modern biomedical science and evidence-based clinical practice have made enormous contributions toward the alleviation of suffering through development of effective treatments for illness as well as preventative interventions. And many of these advances have emerged through a systematic focus on basic biological processes in response to pathogens and to injury, and the development of interventions that either interrupt pathological processes or facilitate the body's own healing capacity. So the focus and systematic empirical methods of biomedical science are really critical and have enabled those advances. But I think there's also an implicit aspect of the worldview of biomedical science that has often included a divide between the mind and the body. One consequence of that artificial divide, I think, is that it's a frequent experience of patients within our healthcare settings that while their bodies are well attended, their experience of distress, of suffering, and of the consequences of illness and incapacity for their lives in social as well as other contexts get neglected. I think as recent research has demonstrated, and as you're going to hear more about this afternoon, the experience of distress itself clearly changes the brain with consequences throughout the body, and I think that further testifies to the artificiality of any mind-body division. Our vision for today's meeting is one that endeavors to expand the scope of how we think about illness and distress, suffering, and healing. The presentations and dialogues today are going to incorporate perspectives that integrate basic and clinical research with new discoveries concerning the critical role of the social environment and human capacities for resilience, for healing, and even for flourishing, as revealed by modern research on neuroplasticity, a very important part of what we're going to be talking about today. Another very important part of this conversation concerns the contributions from contemplative wisdom traditions that have long been concerned with human distress and suffering, as well as the importance of ethical behavior and the development of mental training practices that have the potential to alleviate suffering. Now, we recognize that these kinds of conversations are often difficult. People in the fields of science and medical practitioners are understandably skeptical about claims that are made concerning the role of mind in medicine and healthcare. And for that reason, we therefore also wish to examine how psychosocial variables and contemplative mental training practices, particularly meditation, are now being rigorously explored within neuroscience laboratories and real-world research settings. These scientific investigations have both encouraged the continuing integration and scientific assessment of contemplative perspectives and mental training practices in healthcare, and also underscore how there aren't any easy answers or panaceas. So that's something we want to really dig into in discussion today. The scientific and clinical experience of our speakers and discussants, I think, is going to offer us, particularly in dialogue with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a very rich, stimulating, and informative day today. Today's meeting is made possible by the generous support of the Hershey Foundation and the ongoing Mind and Life Institute support of the several generous patrons and sponsors that are listed in your program brochure, several of whom are here with us today. So we're very, very grateful for that. We're also very appreciative of the support and assistance of the private office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for the contributions of our panelists today, for the program planning committee members who put this meeting together, and of course for the Mind and Life Institute staff members who have been working very hard to make this possible and who are going to be supporting today's meeting and providing information that you may need throughout the day. And finally, we're very deeply grateful for this wonderful hosting of the meeting here at Rockefeller University, this lovely auditorium, as facilitated by Dr. Bruce McEwen. I want to make just a few general announcements and a few requests to you. First, while we're here in the Casbury Auditorium, please refrain from eating or drinking. Also, flash photography is not allowed, but Mind and Life staff are going to be taking photographs which will be made available later. There are 2 fire exits on either side of the stage in front of you, as well as the double doors that you came in through today. And there are restrooms that are, if you go up to the top of the stairs and then curve around, they're downstairs under the auditorium, and also some, out in the corridor where the refreshments were located earlier. There's no smoking anywhere on campus, and please make sure that your cell phone is either shut off or on silent, since it can be interrupting even if it's on vibrate mode. Our question and answer sessions are going to be moderated, and so we ask that if you have a question or a comment, you raise your hand. The staff will be circulating around with 3 microphones that they'll get to you to pose your question or comment. And then the moderator will select your question. We'll call on you. So please be patient with that process. Finally, we want to ask you to keep your seats that you're occupying now all day today. And that includes even after lunch. Try to occupy again the same seat that you've selected this morning. If you need any assistance throughout the day, you can identify the Mind and Life staff by their green badges, and so please feel free to ask them anything that you need or that would be of help to you. At this point, I'd like to invite our morning panelists to come on up and take their seats up on the stage. And now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Bruce McEwen, a really creative, prolific, and influential neuroscientist, and one of Rockefeller's very distinguished professors. Bruce?
Thank you very much, and welcome. It's wonderful to see you all here this morning, and it is a great honor for us to welcome His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama to our university. Our president, Mark Tessier-Levine, would have liked to be here, but a family emergency has taken him away from campus this weekend. We're delighted that the Mind Life Institute has chosen Rockefeller for this meeting, being in the tri-institutional area and in New York City, where I know there is a lot of interest in the topic that we'll be discussing today. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to tell you more about the Rockefeller University and what goes on in the beautiful campus that you see here. Rockefeller, as you know, is one of the world's foremost biomedical research institutes. It's dedicated to conducting innovative, high-quality research to improve the understanding of life for the benefit of humanity. Founded by John D. Rockefeller in 1901, the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research was the first institution in the United States devoted solely to studying the underlying causes of disease. In the 1950s, a Ph.D. program was established by our president at that time, Detlef Wolf Bronk. In 1965, reflecting this broader mandate, educational mandate, the Rockefeller Institute became the Rockefeller University. And today, Rockefeller University attracts exceptional graduate students and postdoctoral fellows from all over the world. Since its founding, Rockefeller has enjoyed an unparalleled record of biomedical achievements. Laboratories here have been home to some of the world's most significant scientific advances, including the discovery of DNA as the hereditary material and the fact that viruses can cause cancer. Over the years, 24 scientists associated with Rockefeller have been awarded the Nobel Prize. 21 have received the prestigious Lasker Award. 34 are members of or foreign associates of the National Academies of Science, while 16 of our tenured faculty members have been elected to the Academy's Institute of Medicine. The university is organized around 73 independent laboratories. It has a very unique philosophy when it comes to its approach to recruiting preeminent scientists, that is, to hire the person, not the field. With that in mind, it's of note that the largest area of research concentration at Rockefeller is neuroscience, with 24 laboratories, more than a third of our 73 labs, studying the nervous system from multiple perspectives. These laboratories are investigating the molecular, cellular, and systems levels, and their interests range from fundamental biology to research that focuses on specific diseases. Now, I am a neuroscientist and a neuroendocrinologist, which means I study the brain and how it controls and also responds to the secretion of hormones such as cortisol and the sex hormones. We've discovered that the brain responds to these hormonal signals like cortisol in both positive and negative ways, and that there's considerable structural plasticity in the brain architecture, including the generation of new neurons, the remodeling of the dendrites of nerve cells, and the turnover of synaptic connections that communicate the information from one cell to the other. And that this allows experiences such as stressful experiences, but also positive experiences, to shape the brain. And indeed, the social environment has a powerful influence on the brain and on brain structure and function, as we and others are beginning to discover, and something you'll hear more about today. As to why I'm motivated to play a role in today's conversation, there is a gulf, as we've heard, between much current medical practice that relies very heavily on pharmacologic agents to prevent and treat disease, including behavioral disorders and their physical manifestations. And this outlook does not take full account of the individual lived experience in shaping the brain and also body health or proneness for disease. Not too long ago, I gave a talk at a major medical center in their integrative medicine slot. And afterwards, I was invited to Morning Report, where I heard two residents present a case of a woman who came in to the hospital with a severe autoimmune and inflammatory disorder. These residents talked about the drugs that worked or did not work very well until I asked for more information about her condition when she came in. And they said she had just learned that her son had Hodgkin's disease. What troubled me was the fact that this had not come out in the initial part of the presentation of this particular case. And that has galvanized my interest in the topic of today's meeting. So we're here today to discuss practices outside the traditional domains of medicine, such as behavioral interventions that are increasingly recognized as having real biological consequences for both the brain and the body, and that synergize with pharmaceuticals and other medical procedures to help individuals deal constructively with their own lived experiences. Now, Rockefeller scientists have a long tradition of being open to learning from those who are caregivers. Now we are gaining a much more sophisticated understanding of the interactions between cognition, emotion, and the brain. We know these are integrated and are finally beginning to understand how this occurs. And today's conversation is a step, hopefully a step in that direction. In recent years, there's been a cumulative interest in ways that contemplative practices may provide emotional and physical benefits. What's wonderful is these theories are now, as you will hear, being supported by science. Which brings us then to the topic of today's discussion. We're so fortunate to be joined by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who will be arriving soon, and who has embraced and encouraged a dialogue between the scientific and spiritual communities, and who has also engaged personally in many of these conversations and promoted scientific research into meditating practices. So it's now my pleasure to turn the podium over to the moderator for this morning's session, Anne Harrington, a professor at Harvard. Anne?
Thank you very much. It is on. Let me just start by telling you a little bit about the structure of what's going to be happening in both this morning session and in the afternoon session, because the essence of what this is all about is dialogue. So I've just borrowed the watch from my friend Jimmy Holland over here to be timekeeper. There will be obviously some presentations, but they're going to be 10 minutes. Just enough to get some big issues on the table to enable an interesting back and forth. And there'll be two moments of back and forth. There'll be a moment immediately after each talk in which His Holiness will be invited to ask any questions he might have. The speaker might have a question for him. It might open up to the rest of the group. But at that point, you will not yet be involved. We're going to keep the dialogue within the group for that first period. We'll do that for each of the three short presentations. And then we've made available quite a large period of time for an integrated dialogue, both with the panelists and then opening up to you. So there will be microphones that will be available that you can raise your hand and they'll be brought to you. And you can be part of this conversation. What we expected is that at 9:30 we would be able to stand up and welcome His Holiness into the room. Apparently he's at a press conference and he's been delayed for a few minutes. So what we are going to need to do is sort of be a little bit patient. Apparently at MIT this happened earlier in the weekend. I was told there were 2,000 people and they were kept waiting for something like 30 minutes. We don't think that you're going to be waiting for 30 minutes, but what I'm doing is I'm waiting to hear. I'm going to get this. Oh, there's the person that's going to give me a signal when we get the 1 minute signal. But since we knew this could happen, we have a backup plan. We didn't know. We were sort of hot. And what we thought, maybe we have 5, maybe we have a couple of minutes, maybe we have 10 minutes, but while we have this little bit of extra time, what we thought we might do is invite a very close colleague, both of many of the scientists who will be speaking today and of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Mathieu Ricard, to come up and speak to a question that might not otherwise get on the table, which is, I don't know why all of you are here exactly. I don't know, but we have our reasons, and we all have our reasons for participating, but people sometimes ask, why does His Holiness participate? What is interesting from the Buddhist point of view in doing this? And Mathieu actually has quite a lot to say about this, because he's a person who lives in both worlds. He is someone who's trained as a scientist in Paris at the Pasteur Institute in molecular biology, but then left that world and became a monastic, a Tibetan Buddhist monk, and now, in a sense, spends a lot of his time straddling the life worlds of these two traditions. So, Mathieu, would you come up? Just come. Would you mind? I hope you don't feel this is the seat of honor, but you can come. No. He wouldn't. Come. All right. He's going to sit. This is. You will see Mathieu again in the afternoon. But he's graciously agreed to talk a bit to us. What we'll do is he will talk, but when I get the signal, I will. I'm going to sort of gesture, and then he will, elegantly wrap up, and I will then in 10 seconds, and then I will welcome. His Holiness, and probably what I'll do is I will introduce His Holiness to the people he'll be speaking with. He'll say hello to all of you, and we'll begin. So thank you for being a little bit flexible. We don't have complete control over this piece, but I think we're going to have a wonderful day today, and this will be a wonderful way to start us off.
So, you need a mic? It's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing about this clothing. You yeah. Why don't you just take the hand mic?
Hello? No? Hello?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So, I don't think I even qualify as a spare wheel. But while we are happily and gratefully working for His Holiness, as Anne said, basically, how do we become involved, and how we feel that the contribution of contemplative can be meaningful. So in my case, as Anne mentioned, I began at the Pasteur Institute with François Jacob and Jacques Monod, and besides the excitement of being part of this wonderful team of research, what I really kept all my life is this passion for rigorous honesty, intellectual honesty about investigating the reality, and so not fooling around with strange ideas and unprovable fact or something like that. And then I sort of met great teachers, Tibetan teachers, while I was at the Pasteur Institute. When I was 20, I traveled to Darjeeling in India and met one of the greatest masters of our times, some of whom became teachers to His Holiness himself. And there I found a perfect adequation between the person and the teaching. The messenger was the message, someone who was embodying the teaching, and I felt this is something which I have sort of aspired to without really knowing what I was looking for. As my friend Ben Shapiro, with whom I share a desk at Pasteur Institute, said, I knew what I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted really in life. And so meeting those great teachers make immense sense for me. And then I thought, well, why not exploring, investigating the mind, exploring how emotions work, exploring the mechanism of happiness and suffering. That seems fascinating. I was coming from studying cell division in E. coli, bacteria. So I thought, well, that's just at least as good as that. So I decided to do my postdoc in the Himalayas for 45 years. So now, why did I ever come back? So for 20 years, I literally disappeared. I hardly read a line of French or English. I was immersed in Tibetan texts and practicing for many years in my hermitage under the leading of my teachers. Then I was imprudently accepted to do a dialogue with my father, the late philosopher Jean-François Revel, called The Monk and the Philosopher, and that brought me back in the sphere of the Western intellectual life. And I knew Francisco Varela, who with Adam Engel founded Mind and Life, much before I joined Mind and Life, because he was a deep Buddhist practitioner. Besides being a great neuroscientist, he came to see my teachers. So when one day he told me, after I did a second book with an astrophysicist, Matthew, you are wasting your time with physics. You'll never go, I mean, nothing wrong with physics, of course, sorry. But what he said, you will never go to the CERN in Geneva and suggest a kind of experiment. But in neuroscience, you can be an active collaborator from within 1 minute, so that's it. So the breaking point was when in the 2000 Mind and Life meeting on destructive emotions, halfway through the week, his Holiness said, our discussions are wonderful, but what can we contribute to society? So that research program which I joined then was an idea which matched with the Buddhist ideal, how can I transform myself to better serve others? And I think that research has served that, and I might share a few more words this afternoon, and now within 45 seconds, I will join back my seat.
Thank you very much, Matthew. You see that there? Perfect. Thank you. And now I think it's all right. I'm allowed. We can all welcome His Holiness the Dalai Lama into the conference room. Please join me in welcoming. Where is he? He's. It looks like somebody's come to see that. Is he coming? Okay, he's walking down the path. Well, you know, he's saying hello. The door's opening.